Hey all, it's Dr. Sarah here. So I'm going to do a short video today on what mitochondria are and just a very basic explanation of how they work. So I've had a lot of people ask me about them and to understand them a little bit more because I know I talk a lot about them. So I thought maybe just a little short video to explain it might be helpful. So anyway, your mitochondria are basically little organelles inside every cell of your body except your red blood cells. I'm not going to go into why today. But so each cell has a different number of mitochondria in them. Okay, so some cells have only a small number of mitochondria. The liver cells, for example, that make up your liver have like 3,000 to 5,000 mitochondria per cell. Something like a neuron might have something like 15,000 mitochondria per cell, okay? So there's a big difference depending on what the energy needs are of the cell as to how many mitochondria they have. Now, your mitochondria look like little bean-shaped shafts organelles, okay? And they have an outer membrane and an inner membrane inside them. The inner membrane is really important for generating the mitochondria's battery potential, okay? So you might have heard of mitochondria being like the energy carriers of your cell producing ATP. Yes, they do. The way that mitochondria do this is they basically have a membrane on the inside, on their inner membrane. They have stacks and stacks of these complexes called the electron transport chain. Okay, so when we talk about food, feeding our body, actually what goes into the mitochondria is not carbs and proteins and fats. It's actually the electrons that are derived from those foods and the electrons and the protons. So with the inner mitochondrial membrane, the way it makes its the energy is by creating an electric current of the electrons tunneling down the protein complexes within the inner membrane. So if we imagine that this is the inner mitochondrial membrane, okay, see how it's nice and tight? So I have a lot of potential energy here. So if I was to fling this off, obviously, it would go flying, but there's a lot of potential energy here, okay? This is a very basic explanation. So for those of you that have physics background or advanced biochemistry, forgive me. But so what happens is electrons come in through one complex and they shoot down to the other complex, basically creating this electric current. Okay, and by creating that electric current, the mitochondria uses that for multiple things. So that current helps it to push hydrogen ions out on one side to create a proton gradient, which is very important for another complex to produce our ATP molecule. But the mitochondria also, during that process, basically release all these free radical signalings, which researchers now identified as, or they've called biophotons or ultra weak photon emission. Okay, so your mitochondria actually produce light, which is super cool. And so we know most of the source of light from cells come from what we call the oxidative phosphorylation in mitochondria, okay? So on one end of this chain, oxygen comes in and pulls the electrons in one way. So the more oxygen you have here on one end, the bigger the current is, okay? Because it's pulling the electrons down to one end to reduce to form water, okay? So if people are hypoxic or low oxygen, this potential won't be very high either, okay? So if this membrane is damaged, or if this membrane starts to become floppy, okay, floppy membrane, okay, like this one, all right, this is like a floppy membrane. Can you see there's very, very little potential energy in this, okay? It's floppy. I haven't got the same charge or pull on this. So I'm not going to get the same electric current forming in the mitochondrial membrane, which means that I'm not going to get the same amount of ATP produced, I'm not going to get the same gradient of protons produced, and I'm not going to get the same light emission and free radical signaling produced that dictates what the mitochondrion does in the cell, okay? Now, lots of things can damage your mitochondria or make it become like this. As we age, there is what we call a heteroplasmy rate, so 10% each decade, according to a few different specialists in this area. So basically after about 40 or 50, we go each decade, your heteroplasmy rate, which means that the floppiness of this membrane or the rate at which those protons start to to drift apart starts to increase. Okay, now if they're increasing apart, what happens is that potential charge is no longer there, but then you get leakage of those electrons. Okay, so rather than being tunneled straight down, okay, to the oxygen, they leak out where they're not meant to leak out, and that's what we call, if you get too much of that, then we call that free radicals, okay, or oxidative damage, because then the electrons are getting pumped, they're falling out where they shouldn't be rather than being directed to where they should be. I hope that makes some sense. This is a very basic explanation. So things that can damage your mitochondria too, so things like certain, so excess sugar, anything that causes oxidative damage or that damages the inner membrane of the mitochondria. If you're not sleeping properly, so melatonin is one of the most important hormones in the body. It's actually produced by the mitochondria as well. Melatonin is like the self-service for the mitochondria. So HELP takes it from this, and melatonin makes it more like this again, okay? So if you're not getting enough sleep, okay, that's a big factor for mitochondria, and we know that lack of sleep is linked to a lot of metabolic issues, okay, because of its effect on the mitochondrial membrane and its ability to do its job. Okay, if you're too much blue light at night, okay, will actually significantly reduce your melatonin production. So if you're not making melatonin while you sleep, you're not fixing your membranes to go from this, okay, to this. All right, so there are things that we can do to offset that damage in heteroplasmy that happens as we get older, okay? They're actually quite basic things, and everyone has access to do them. I go through a lot of this stuff in my group about how to improve your circadian cycle and rhythm. So if your circadian cycle is out, I guarantee your mitochondria are not going to be regenerating properly, okay? Because they listen to your circadian signal from your brain, which also tells every single cell in your body what time of day it is, what they should be doing at that particular time. And most importantly, you need that melatonin at night to regenerate that membrane. So it goes from this, floppy, damaged membrane, okay, to a tighter membrane, okay? So I hope that makes some sort of sense. Now, just the other thing too is the mitochondria are not just about making energy. Yes, it's very important that they do make energy in the form of ATP, but ATP is used for multiple different signaling chemical reactions in the body. It also makes water, so mitochondria make intracellular water. So when those electrons tunnel down and hit the oxygen, they combine with hydrogen to form intracellular water or metabolic water, which is very, very important source of water for our body, which I'm going to go into detail in another video why. And then also all the signaling that's done from those electrons on the way down as they signal different free radical signaling, that tells a cell different things and tells it what to do. So all the way from neurotransmitter synthesis to steroid synthesis to telling the cell when it needs to recycle organs, growth, metabolism, a whole lot of functions that the mitochondria do, okay? So it's not just energy production, whilst that's a very important part. The mitochondria have a significant impact in actually dictating and controlling how the cell functions, okay? So we want to make sure we've got nice, healthy mitochondria, okay? So basically, if you think about it like this, mitochondria, I like to think about them as being like multicolored little organelles, okay? So when they're healthy, they produce biophoton ranges all the way from 200 to 700 nanometers, which for those of you that are physics geeks, you'll know that's from the UV to the infrared range, okay? So basically we have these awesome little light producing organelles in us that are producing these little light signals. We can't perceive them because it's too weak for us to pick up from our eyes, obviously, but we do have detectors now that can detect it. So things called photomultipliers, which we can now detect. That's my chicken Ruby, by the way. She always has to make an appearance somewhere. Oh dear. Anyway, okay, so that's my video on mitochondria. I hope that makes some sense. I apologize if it was too basic for some of you who might have a bit more of an understanding. I apologize if it was too advanced for some of you that don't know anything about mitochondria. I'm sort of trying to find that mid-range where it all kind of makes some sense. But if you have any questions, pop it in the group or pop it on the YouTube channel. I will be doing another video soon on ways to improve your mitochondria, but I also have a live talk coming up, which I will talk through the 7 superpowers of how to basically keep your mitochondria healthy and keep your circadian signal healthy. Okay, all right, thanks guys. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye.